There's Dad. If anyone has any questions, let me know. You can comment, and Dad will let me know, and we will get to them. I might have missed some, but I don't think I had written down any questions from last time. So if there were any questions from last time and I missed them, I apologize. But we have quite a bit actually to go through in these 100 years. So I'm going to try to go through it as quickly as possible. It looks like we've got Stephanie and maybe Ashlyn joining us, so that's cool. Remind me, I've got Stephanie's shirts. The thing. So this is the Reformation Part 4. We're going to look at England and. Hey, come on in. I've got shirts for you. Don't let me forget. Yeah. And specifically, there's 5 rulers from 1525 to 1625, and a lot happened. So before now, we've kind of been looking at it chronologically, and now we're popping over to England for a while. We'll at least be there for this time. The English Reformation. We start with King Henry VIII. So I've got the kind of rulers going to be up there in the top at the top, and then kind of the dates are the dates of their rule. So I'll have that on each slide, or most of the slides, so you'll know who we're kind of covering, whose reign we're in. So the English Reformation is unique because unlike the other Reformation movements that all came from the bottom up, right? Luther was just a nothing professor, right, at this university in Wittenberg. Zwingli was just a pastor in Zurich. Calvin was just this exile in Geneva, and there's all the people. It was such a ground up grassroots movement that you had revolts, you had peasants' revolts. It was a very common people movement. The Reformation was. Unlike all the other Reformations, the English Reformation came from above. It was imposed upon the people by the powers that be. And the people were generally, for a long time, pretty unsympathetic to the official new religion. They weren't big fans of the change. And it all started because King Henry VIII wanted a smooth succession of power. All right? And because King Henry VIII wanted a smooth succession of power, and we'll get into this more, you guys are now our Protestants. I'll trade, don't worry, we'll get there. He had a daughter, and technically she could succeed after him, but he was worried that his dynasty was real new, and he was worried that it wouldn't stand a challenge from powerful rivals. So he wanted a son, right? He wanted a son. He had a daughter, Mary, but he wanted a son. So he tries to divorce his wife, Catherine of Aragon. This is her looking down disapprovingly at me, I guess. Aragon is a part of Spain. So Spain, like most countries, Spain, Germany, it's not defined like it was today. You had sections of Spain. You had Aragon, you had Castile, you had all these different areas, right? So she's from Aragon. So Henry VIII, he's a Catholic. He's a Catholic ruler. And so if he wants to get a divorce, it technically wasn't called a divorce. He would have to get an annulment. So they would come up with some trumped up, religious reason why their marriage would be annulled. So, for instance, that he would say that she cheated on him, or that she was worshiping another god, or whatever it was. And usually the Pope would go, okay, marriage annulled, and they'd usually kill her. I think he kills her.
She's just divorced. Yeah, she's alive.
Okay.
It's the next one. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then the fourth one.
Yeah. So it was for nothing other than she could give him a son or wouldn't give him a son. So usually the Pope would just rubber stamp this. If you remember, why was King Henry VIII? He had some. My ring's not on. I'm like, it's driving me nuts. King Henry VIII had some sway with the Pope. Does anybody remember what King Henry VIII had done for the Catholic Church? He had the title Defender of the Faith. How did he get Defender of the Faith? Yeah, he got some theologians together, and when Luther was doing his stuff, he wrote things against Martin Luther. I mean, he didn't write them at all, obviously, but these people did. What's funny about that is him and Luther hated each other until their deathbeds. Even after King Henry VIII went Protestant. He couldn't stand Luther. Luther couldn't stand him. Shocking, I know. So usually the Pope would rubber stamp this and then move on. However, the Pope was in kind of a tough position. So Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, remember Charles V was Charles I of Spain. And the Pope didn't want him to be Holy Roman Emperor. The Pope had wanted Frederick, the Elector of Saxony, Martin Luther's sovereign, to become the Pope because he knew he couldn't, or to become the Holy Roman Emperor because he knew he couldn't control Charles. So Charles V and the Pope get into a thing, and Charles lays a siege to Rome. It's not officially a siege because the Holy Roman Emperor can't be attacking the Pope. That'd be bad for politics. But he's basically laying siege to Rome. And the Pope so the Pope is being really careful with the Holy Roman Emperor right now. He doesn't want to upset Charles. And the sticky wicket is that Catherine is the aunt of Charles V. She's from Aragon. She's from Spain. She's his aunt. All these people are intermarried, and they'd all marry like rulers and stuff. So it's not surprising. So the Pope says, you can't have a divorce, or you can't have an annulment from Catherine of Aragon. And he says, if you marry again, I will excommunicate you. So he's currying favor with Charles V. Notice that this is 100% political. There's no theological reasons for this. There's no religious reasons. It's just all political theater. So King Henry VIII, hey, come on in. King Henry VIII, he kind of is used to getting his way, and he's not happy that he can't get a divorce from Catherine. So he just declares bankruptcy. No, he declares that England's an independent empire, and he gets the same guys who wrote the assertion against Martin Luther. He says, all right, now I need you to... They got him the title from the Pope, Defender of the Faith. He said, okay, guys, I've got another one for you. I need justification to say that my kingdom, the kingdom of England, is actually an empire. And that can rival the Holy Roman Empire. And I am the sovereign of this empire. And as sovereign of this empire, I'm actually head of our church, the church in England. And so the guys get together, and they're working through it, and they're like, what about King Arthur? So they use King Arthur. They write about how England is this empire based on the legend of King Arthur, and which they considered, I guess, good enough history. And they wrote this fake history of England, basically, about how King Henry VIII, the head of the King of England, was actually an emperor, and he was supreme, right? So they use King Arthur as their justification for doing this. So King Henry VIII goes, he passes a few different acts, right? He makes some laws. And the first one is the Succession Act, which he said the crown is going to go to his children. This doesn't really have any teeth because crowns are always basically taken by force sometimes. But he passes the Succession Act, and then he does the Supremacy Act, which is that whoever the ruler of England is actually the head of the English church. The Church of England. That's to this day. Okay, so Queen Elizabeth II, who just passed away, and now King Charles, they're technically the head of the Church of England. The Church of England is still the Church of England. It's still tied in with the government. It's still this way. It's crazy how many things we go, hey, this is the way it was in like 1500, and that's how it is today. And then he passed the Treason Act, and he said, if you don't believe any of this, you're an act of treason. You're basically a traitor to the throne, and I can kill you, take your land. So all the Catholic bishops and priests had a really tough decision to make. They could either accept this and get kicked out of the church, but keep their heads, or they could deny this and risk death or exile or whatever. Now, King Henry said, okay, we're no longer under the Pope, but that was it. Everything else kind of remained the same, right? They still had bishops. They still did everything kind of, at least initially, everything remained the same. It was like Catholicism without the Pope, basically. King Henry VIII kind of became the Pope. Now, one consequence to this is a cartoon of King Henry VIII, chasing the fat friar who's dropping all the gold and stuff. So there's a couple countries close to England who always want to invade and fight England. remember, the Holy Roman Empire was kind of held together by string. And now they had a legitimate reason to invade England, to restore papal authority. So France and Spain go, we want to invade England. We'll take it over, or at least like take everything from it. France had already invaded England before, obviously, William the Conqueror is from Normandy. Spain will, in a short period of time, attack. We'll talk about that. So King Henry VIII said, I need money to fund a defensive campaign. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all the monasteries. And I'm going to take all their gold, and I'm going to use that to defend myself against countries who might invade, because I decided that we were no longer part of the Catholic Church, so that I could get married to somebody else, so that I could hopefully have a son. All right, everyone following this?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a painting of him abolishing the monasteries and getting all the money from that. You and King Henry VIII, you're gout brothers. So, you have that in common. So in 1536, he dissolves the monasteries to fund his defensive campaign. Now, the problem is that he only lived about 10 more years, and between 1536 and his death, he doesn't give any direction to the Church of England. They are Protestant by definition, because they no longer recognize papal authority, but they're Catholic in about everything else. And he flirts with some stuff. Like he actually flirts with Lutheranism for a little bit, even though he hates Luther because it's starting to become popular with the people. He tries not to offend Catholics for a while, and he embraces a few ideas from other Reformations. So the people are just like left to fend for themselves, basically. They don't know what to do. There is no pope, and there's no more monasteries, and monks are no longer there, and the church is just kind of running as it can. And so he dies in 1547 with things kind of a mess. Now, he does have a son, but they didn't know how this son was going to steer England, because this son, Edward, was only 9 when he became king. So obviously he didn't really rule, or he didn't completely rule. He had some influential advisors. And the most influential advisor religiously was a guy named Thomas Cranmer. You may have heard of Thomas Cranmer. Thomas Cranmer became the Archbishop of Canterbury. The Archbishop of Canterbury is basically the head of the Church of England religiously. Okay, so the king is the supreme head. But the highest religious authority in the Church of England is the Archbishop of Canterbury. It's like how the Pope is technically the Bishop of Rome, and that's the highest bishopric. The Archbishop or Archbishop of Canterbury is the Pope, quote, it's not really the Pope, but he's the highest religious authority in the Anglican Church.
To this day.
To this day, yes. So you can guess why why is the Anglican Church called the Anglican Church?
Because Anglican comes from England.
Yeah, Anglo-Saxon, Anglican Church, Church of England, it means the same thing. That's why the Church of England in America is not called the Anglican Church, because we as Americans we don't want to be in the Church of England. So what is the Church of England in America called?
Episcopal.
The Episcopal Church. All right, St. Paul's Episcopal Church. It's the Church of England in America. You can't have the Church of England in America. We fought a war for it. So the Episcopal. Why is the Episcopal Church called the Episcopal Church? What does Episcopal mean? You know this one? Episcopal is bishops. Has to do with having bishops. So the Episcopal Church is the only Protestant denomination that has bishops. It's a holdover from Catholicism that we get from the Church of England.
And they call their pastor's father.
Yeah. And there's priests and yes, they do. They've retained a lot of their kind of Catholic. They're formally, like in their form, like the way they address things, Catholic, but they're Protestant in theology. We'll talk about that. So Cranmer, he uses these 6 years that I messed up too. Edward did not reign from. Did he? He only reigned for 6 years. So that should say 1547. I'm sorry, 1547 to 1553. Sorry about the dates. I got those wrong. He goes through this process of trying to make England Protestant. Well, he has to write things. He has to get. It's like Luther. Remember Luther? He gets to the common people and he goes, "These people don't know anything. They don't know any doctrine. Like, we've gotten rid of the Catholic Church, but that also gets rid of everything that teaches anybody anything. So Kramer wrote the influential Book of Common Prayer. The Anglican Church still uses Kramer's Book of Common Prayer. And through Edward, Kramer did a really smart thing. He starts to invite leading European Protestants to come to England, and he gives them prestigious positions at English universities. Okay? So he gets Martin Bucer, and he becomes the head of the Divinity School in Cambridge, and he gets another one that becomes the head of the Divinity School in Oxford. So he's very smart in knowing, okay, if Protestantism is going to stick, we've got to start educating people. So he starts getting leading Protestants and giving them cushy, or not cushy, that's the wrong word, but like elevated positions of in the universities, right? So Kramer is a genius. That's Edward. The bad thing, if Edward had stuck around, everything probably would have been hunky-dory for Kramer. Unfortunately for him, Edward dies in 1552. You'll notice that a lot of these people don't live very long. Now, sometimes it's through, some kind of subterfuge, but mostly they die young because they're all intermarrying with each other. It's like the Caesars, and it doesn't work out very well. It's not how it's supposed to work. So Edward dies, and again, it's 1547 to 1553, and the 6 years were not enough to solidify England as a Protestant nation, because after Edward, who comes after Edward? Does anybody know? Mary Queen of Scots, also known as Mary Tudor. She is the daughter of Catherine of Aragon, and she's upset. Yes.
Fun fact,
Yeah.
Mary Tudor is the backstory behind Bloody Mary.
Yes, you're very right. Good point. Yes. Bloody, if you heard of Bloody Mary, that is this Mary. Mary Tudor, Mary the First, Mary Queen of Scots. She is Henry VIII's oldest daughter. She's the one that he had with Catherine of Aragon. And she she tries to restore Catholicism. She is not a fan of Protestantism. All right? Why do you think she's not a fan of Protestantism? Yeah, because he did. The reason that she wasn't queen in the first place is because this was allowed to happen. So she goes, we're going right back. Now if you're the people, if you're just a common person, you're going through it, you're waking up, King Henry VIII goes, hey, we're not Catholic anymore. We don't obey the Pope. And you go, okay. All right. I guess now I will say this, I forgot to mention this on Edward the Sixth. People stopped going to church because they didn't have to anymore. Okay, when they're Catholic, they had to. When Edward came through, they didn't have to. So they're like, I don't want to go anymore. They're like, we don't like it anymore. We liked it the way it was. Again, it wasn't a reformation from the bottom up. The people were much more comfortable with the way that their church was operated than churches in like Germany and Switzerland and France and stuff. So they weren't happy with the changes. They weren't happy that there were no longer any monks. They weren't happy that their priests were different. They weren't happy that the service was different. So they stopped going to church. And so then Mary comes back and they're like, we're Catholic again. They're like, okay, but there's no monasteries. And of course she needs a new archbishop. She appoints a new Archbishop of Canterbury, Reginald Pole, which is like the most English name I've ever heard of. Mm-hmm. We'll talk a little bit more about him. And they start arresting and getting rid of Protestant bishops. And poor Thomas Kramer gets burned at the stake at Oxford, the same university where he had just appointed a leading reformer as the head professor of divinity. So poor Thomas Kramer, if Edward had lived longer, or Mary had not been alive, then he probably would have lived a lot longer. But instead, he gets popped. So Mary tries to restore Catholicism. We're under the Pope again. She makes the Archbishop of Canterbury Reginald Pole, who had been a Catholic bishop before. And England, once again, is a Catholic nation. Okay? So for a few years under King Henry VIII, they're mostly Catholic under King Henry VIII's rule, and then all of a sudden they're not. And they're not for Edward's 6-year reign, and then now they're back to being Catholic. As you see, Mary, Queen of Scots, did not rule very long. So Protestants that's what she looks like. Or that's, so she was, all right. So Protestants fled England in droves. She's got that hate, just keeping her strong. Right. And they start to go to some of these Protestant havens in Europe. All right. And if Mary had lived long enough, England probably would have settled into being a Catholic country yet again. The problem is these people don't live very long. And she died on November 17th, 1558, and her and Archbishop Pole actually died within a few hours of each other. So all of a sudden, the two biggest Catholic influences in England, Reginald Pole, Archbishop of Canterbury, and Mary, Queen of Scots, Mary I, died. Well, Henry VIII had one last child. Okay? He had one last child. And if you're a common folk, you go, I don't know what this one's going to be. What are we going to do? Are we going to be Catholic, still? Or are we going to be Protestant again? What is going to happen? So enter Elizabeth I. So Elizabeth II that just passed away, this is Elizabeth I. This is who she was named after. Elizabeth I was the daughter of who? Who's the only wife of King Henry VIII that any of us know?
He had a bunch. The Anne Boleyn one?
She's Anne Boleyn. She's the daughter of Anne Boleyn. Edward was the son of his third wife, Jane Seymour. So, Elizabeth is the daughter of Anne Boleyn. Now, Anne Boleyn, who King Henry VIII cheated on while he was still married to Catherine, actually impregnated her with Elizabeth while he was still married to Catherine, was a big fan of Protestants. It was the hip thing. I don't know if she was really into it, or if it was more just like the kind of like a hip thing to do in the social circles. It was kind of young, and everybody who was cool was doing it. So Anne Boleyn was like this big kind of Protestant backer, and so she was Protestant, and Elizabeth was unquestionably Protestant. However, she had a big problem because Catholic Spain is super strong militarily at the time. What was Spain famous for back then? What did they have that was the envy of the world?
Pizza.
The Armada.
Ships.
They had the Armada, the Spanish Armada. They had a lot of ships. Now, I don't know if you know this, but England is an island and surrounded by water. And Spain's not that far away. So any country that has a lot of ships and isn't happy is a threat. And Elizabeth I is Protestant to her core. Her mama's Anne Boleyn, her daddy's was King Henry VIII. But she's really careful not to offend Catholic Spain. In fact, she tries to marry at different times various Spanish princes. She wants to marry a Spanish prince. She'll remain the Queen of England, but she wants to marry a Spanish prince so that they can have a stronger alliance, or they can have an alliance, so she doesn't have to worry about Spain attacking. However, all the Protestants in England are against it. So what does Elizabeth do? Who does Elizabeth marry? Who does Elizabeth I marry?
French. She's gonna go.
She's French. You're just throwing out nationalities.
No, I figured if you want to get an alliance.
She doesn't get married.
Oh wow.
She doesn't marry at all. She's the Virgin Queen.
Wow.
That's Elizabeth I. She's like, fine. She doesn't really care. She didn't want to get married for love. She just wanted to get married so she didn't have to worry about Spain attacking. She's like, fine, I won't get married. And if Spain attacks, that's on you guys. So she comes up with this thing called the settlement of religion. And what the settlement of religion, she goes, okay, we need a little bit of order. Her dad was no help. Edward was helpful. He was moving things in the right direction, or at least Thomas Cranmer was through him, because he was a child. But Mary just threw things into complete chaos, right? It's just chaos. So she's like, we need to settle things. So the settlement of religion was all about settling things. So she reestablished that the English ruler is the head of the church. She got out of Catholicism again. She was like, we secede. We're out. We're done. No more Catholics. No more Pope. And she she tried to fix some other things. She said, okay, we can't have this. We can't have people not going to church. So she was like, you have to go to church. Church attendance became mandatory. Yeah, but she maintained it. It was mandatory on Sundays and feast days. Okay, so you didn't have to go in the other times throughout the week. You didn't have to. You had to go Sunday morning, and if there was a feast day, you had to go on a feast day. It was mandatory. Because she was like, we need people to start accepting this religion. Because this religion was about the authority of the English ruler. Okay, and she knows this. Elizabeth I was brilliant. She was really brilliant. She was way smarter than her daddy, for sure. Probably because of her mom. So she makes church attendance compulsory, but she doesn't go as far. There's these radical Protestants, all right? Now, we have these radical Protestants who are now in England because for the last 5 years, the most important of them had to flee. And where did they go?
France.
They went to Geneva. They went to Strasbourg. They went to all of these Protestant havens, probably France too in certain parts, and they got a taste for what pure like Protestant religion was. They got the good stuff, the free cities of Zurich and Geneva, where they didn't have to worry about all this other stuff. So they come back to England and they're like, we don't want anything that was Catholic. We don't want the images. We don't want priests. We don't want bishops. We don't want archbishops. We don't want any of that stuff. We want the pure. We want the good. We want it. And Elizabeth goes, no, because she knows if she does that, then it's going to make it really easy for people to attack. So you have these radical Protestants who are starting to cause problems. And there's a discontented party of these Protestants who want a pure church along the lines of Calvin's Geneva, and they become known as the what?
Puritans.
The Puritans. That's why they're called the Puritans. They want a pure church. I forgot that, but yeah, there's them. They're arguing. It's just a whole bunch of old white dudes. All right. So they are rising up kind of against, to a degree, Elizabeth. Now they are still part of the Church of England, but they are mad at the direction. So Elizabeth is dealing with all this. She's dealing with the people who really just want to be Catholic. She's dealing with the Protestant Puritans who are unhappy that she won't go like full bore Protestant. And then she's also like trying to keep Catholic Spain and everybody okay with her so she doesn't have to get attacked. And then something happens. The Pope makes a huge blunder. Pope Pius V thinks that he's going to rally the common people who are Catholic if he excommunicates Elizabeth. He gives a papal bull, just like they did with Luther, and he excommunicates Queen Elizabeth. And he absolves all of her subjects from the oath of allegiance, and basically he hopes that it's going to start a revolt from the common people and inspire Spain and France and the Holy Roman Empire to get involved to attack England. All right. The problem, and Europeans still don't maybe get this, and this was England at the time, and eventually America, is that what the English hate and what America later hates more than anything is being told what to do by foreign people.
Yeah.
So what this excommunication does, all it does, is it rallies everyone around Elizabeth. The Puritans who were really mad at her go like, we're not gonna let you get after our Protestant queen. We're Protestants. So they defend Elizabeth, and even the common people go, who does the Pope think that he is, the Pope? To tell us what we have to do. How dare he excommunicate our queen? British people love their queen. Okay, I don't know if you knew that. But they loved Elizabeth II, they loved Elizabeth I. So this was such a monumental blunder that religious historians think that this is part of the reason that the Pope did not denounce Hitler as strongly as people think that the papacy should have. Because there was a bad history of the Pope denouncing a ruler and the common people rallying around him. And so they said the Pope didn't come out very strongly against Hitler. And one of the reasons was because they didn't want the same thing to happen with Hitler and the German people that happened with the English people and Elizabeth. This was how monumental of a failure. This right here is what lost the Catholic Church England. The Catholic Church lost England because of this. It was also for Mary. Now, it gave, Spain went full bore. They're like, sweet, we're going then. We're invading. And they got their huge armada, and they attacked England, and they were the Goliath. I mean, everybody expected them to win. And they would take over, restore the papacy. They would probably put some relative of Catherine of Aragon or Charles V on the throne, and England would be part of the Holy Roman Empire, and they'd be Catholic and all that. But they failed, and they tried again, and they failed, and they tried again, and they failed. Eventually, they gave up. England has never been conquered by a sea invasion, never. And this was Spain's Armada in 1588 they had almost 200 ships, they had 20,000 soldiers, and they tried to take England, and they couldn't. So, unlike Edward or Mary, Elizabeth, she had them good genes, because Anne Boleyn was a commoner. Anne Boleyn had those strong genes. So Elizabeth ruled for a long time, and her long and stable reign allowed England to transform into a Protestant nation. You are Protestant today because Elizabeth I was the daughter of the Protestant Anne Boleyn and not the Catholic Catherine of Aragon. If Elizabeth's mother had been Catholic, if Elizabeth had been Catholic, England would have stayed Catholic. England might have never left. I mean, that's part of its conjecture, but England might have never left the Catholic Church. If England never left the Catholic Church, then the people who settled America would have probably been Catholics. And the people that settled America had probably been Catholics. You would probably be Catholic. So, you take that for what it's worth. But way to go, Anne Boleyn. You go, well, God can't use adultery. Well, he did in the Bible, right? He used prostitutes. He used Rahab. He used Anne Boleyn. You're Protestant. Thank you, Anne Boleyn. So Sir Walter Raleigh, he forms a Protestant colony in Roanoke Island, and eventually known as Virginia, after Elizabeth. They're so proud of their queen's virginity, they named a whole state after her. All right? It's a big thing. She probably it doesn't matter. We don't have to get into that. But anyway, yes, she was awesome. She was great. So Anglicanism, the Church of England, it had all the cardinal beliefs of Protestantism. Okay, so it rejected papal authority. It was centered around preaching, and it believed preaching and worship had to be in the public language, in English, not in Latin or something else. It believed in communion for everyone. It said the clergy can marry. It said Scripture, it believed in the sufficiency of Scripture. That's a very Protestant idea, sola scriptura. It believed in justification by faith. It rejected purgatory. All these things. Okay, some people today will tell you that Anglicanism is basically Catholicism without the Pope. That might be how it started. That's not what it is. Anglicanism is Protestantism. It is a Protestant denomination. All right, Episcopals are Protestants. The problem is they don't look like it. Okay, because they like the fancy stuff. They liked looking like they were wearing pajamas with funky hats. So Elizabeth, much to the irritation of the radical Protestants, she retains the bishops. We still have the Archbishop of Canterbury. She gets the bishops. They still call the pastors priests. They still do formally, like I was saying, they look a lot like Catholics. All right, but they are theologically Protestant. Now, in 1593, the conformists, the mainline Church of England people, killed 3 separatist leaders. All right. Now, the separatists, we confuse separatists and Puritans, but it's really simple. The Puritans stayed in the Church of England. The separatists left. The separatists were radical Protestants that said, it's not changing. We're not radical enough. We got bishops. We want Reformed, basically. We want Calvin. We want Presbytery. We don't want to be ruled by bishops. And you have Protestants killing Protestants now. You've got Puritans. You've got the Church of England. You've got the Church of England killing separatists, people who are leaving the Church of England, who are separating from it. And it's sanctioned by the Queen. It's sanctioned by the government. Why would the government want to kill these separatists? Why would these Protestants want to kill the Protestants? Theologically, they agree. They're on the same team. But yet they're killing each other. Why would they kill each other? What is it about the English Reformation in the English Church that makes it make sense that they would kill one another?
Isn't it ruled by the Queen?
Yeah, so there is no separation of church and state at this point. So if you're separating from the church, what are you doing?
Treason.
You're rebelling against the Queen. There is no difference. You can't separate from the Church of England. You can be called separatists, and you can be killed. So in 1607, a small separatist congregation fled England for Holland, and then later they migrated to the new land aboard the Mayflower. They became known as the Pilgrims. And those are your spiritual ancestors. The American Baptists come from a line of faith from the separatists, and then the American Baptists and Southern Baptists split up, and then there's you. So you're not from the Anabaptists. That's the Quakers, the Mennonites, and the Amish. You are from the separatists. So you are the most American thing possible, which is people who decided to leave England. All right? There we go. So if you ever wondered where it came from, and also the separatists and the Puritans were different. The Puritans still stayed in the Church of England. The Pilgrims were separatists. They did not. Now, when they got over to America, they went, hey, another white person. We're friends, because they were trying to survive. So the Puritans and the Pilgrims, and then later on Maryland. Remember, Maryland was actually formed as a Catholic state, and then Rhode Island, which was anybody could you could be, well, not anything, but there's freedom of religion. They all banded together because they were trying to keep from dying from starvation, from Indian attacks, from all that other stuff. So they didn't care, right, at that point. So Puritans and Pilgrims, eventually, they're buddies in America, but in England, they're killing each other. Okay? So Puritans and Pilgrims, not the same at all, just so you know. All right, so Elizabeth dies in 1603 without ever marrying, which they were super proud of for whatever weird reason. So the throne goes to her cousin, he's James VI of Scotland. He's already ruling Scotland. But he becomes James I of England. He's the great-great-grandson of Henry VII. Okay, so now King Henry VIII's line is gone. It was King Henry VIII, and he had Mary, and he had Edward, and he had Elizabeth, and they all died. So his line's over. So ironically, Henry leaves the church because he's so concerned about his dynasty, and his dynasty lasts less than 60 years. Right. And like there's like Chinese dynasties that last like 1,000 years. Okay, so it's like a blip. And yeah, it's you're Protestant because King Henry left the church. He left the church because he cared about his dynasty. His dynasty barely lasted at all. So now we have James I or James VI of England, of Scotland, but now becomes James I of England. Right. So he's not a popular monarch at first, all right? And I'll keep it PG, but I mean, it is what it is. One of the reasons was he had a really thick Scottish accent. And they're like, we can't understand you. They didn't like it. He was very informal. Okay, he was really he was not very fancy. Not very formal. He was really informal, and that kind of upset them. And he was fairly publicly gay. Okay? Now, he got married and he had kids, but it was common knowledge. So much so that when he became the King of England, this epigram went around London that said, Elizabeth was king and now James is queen. Because Elizabeth was, she was quite the dude, right? She was a man's man. She never got married. She was awesome. And then James comes in and they're like, oh, great, look at this Scottish queen. And they didn't like it. The noblemen are like, they don't like it because he starts giving land and money and title and advancement in the court to people that he likes. Let's say that, friends of his. And these included, there's Earls of Desmond and Somerset, the Dukes of Lennox and Buckingham. It is what it is. It's everybody kind of knows it at the time. They're not super happy about it. All right. Now, but the English Puritans are happy about it. Probably not about the gay part, but they're happy that James is king because while in Scotland, he supported the reforms of John Knox. Now, remember, where did John Knox get all his stuff from? No, not Zwingli.
Luther?
Not Luther.
Calvin.
Calvin.
There we go.
Oh, Calvin.
Remember, Calvin influences John Knox. John Knox becomes Reformed. Presbyterian is the Church of Scotland.
Right.
The Presbyterian Church is Reformed. So John Knox and James had supported the reforms of John Knox. And so the Puritans go, sweet, here's a guy who who comes from the kind of pure Calvin Geneva church that we want from John Knox. They were super pumped. They were so happy they actually sent some people to like intercept the carriage on the way to his coronation, which he didn't like very much. However, James, like, yes, he supported John Knox's reforms because it was John Knox's reforms or Catholicism. But when he gets to England, he really likes the Church of England. Why would James I like the Church of England, as opposed to like a John Knox's Reformed Church or something pure from Calvin? Why would James I like the church the way it is? Yeah, Oh yeah, let's move the. Yeah, no. Yeah, instead of me being the head of the church and everybody having to go to church services, and if you leave it, then it's rebellion against me, and you're all traitors. Let's move it to where I'm just kind of on the side, and it's all about the presbytery and God's the head of the church. Yeah, he's like, no. Wait a minute, I can be the. Yeah, I want to be the head. Like, obey me. So James the First. It's like the politicians that promise, hey, once they're in power, they'll do X, Y, and Z. And then they get in power and they go, I like things the way they are. This has worked out so far for everybody else, and now I'm the one that gets the benefits. Anyway, that hasn't changed. James goes, no, I like the Church of England. It's nice. It's comfy. But he grants them 2 concessions. He gives them a conference. I'm sorry, I did this quickly. I misspelled complaints. But he gives them a conference where he listens. It's another very good political thing. He says, you guys can come to the palace. You're all invited. You can come to the palace. I'll listen to you complain. And he listened to them complain. And he said, thank you very much for coming, like a good politician. And they left, and they went, we feel so good because we complained. And then he went, I forgot everything they said. Let's go back to the things the way they were. James I was a really good politician. He wasn't as smart as Elizabeth, but he was a really good politician. He becomes king of England, Ireland, and Scotland. All right? So one concession is he's going to hear their complaints, and during that conference where they're talking about, they complain and they say, you know what, we want a better English, we want an authorized English Bible, we want an Anglican English approved English Bible. And he goes, okay, you can have an English Bible, that's fine. I established this project to have this authorized Bible, and that's where the King James Bible comes from. He is the King James of the King James Bible, with all his faults. It is the most important book of all time. That is without a doubt. Everyone who knows me knows I'm not a fan because it's just not a great translation anymore. But it is without a doubt the most important book of all time. The Bible is the most important book of all time. I'm important. I'm talking about like the most published, the most widespread, the most bought, the most sold, all of that. The Bible kicks butt on everything. And the most important Bible, the most published, sold, blah, blah, blah Bible is the King James Bible. So the King James Bible is the most important book, the most well-read. We're talking about the publishing of it is now in the billions. It has been published billions of times. Okay, there are thousands of editions of the King James Bible. It is the most important book of all time. And it was a throwaway concession of James I because he was giving the Protestants a bone. Okay, he wanted to give them something. He was giving the Puritans something, right? Because he wanted peace. So he's like, fine, I'll listen to your complaints. And he's like, fine, you can have an authorized Bible. And they're like, well, name it after you. And he's like, cool. I like Bibles named after me. So the King James Bible, the authorized version of 1611 is this. Now I'm going to tell you something that I find kind of funny. You might not, and that's fine. You don't have to find it funny. I was looking online at different editions of the King James Bible, and somebody came out with a Queen James Bible, and it's got like a rainbow cross, and it's basically this Bible. It's basically this Bible that they wrote to try and like, I don't know, it's probably some random person to remove what they consider like homophobic stuff. And of course, you know me, I gotta click on the reviews just for fun. There's a bunch of 1 stars, surprisingly. And all these people are mad because of the, because it's a gay Bible. And what I thought was funny
I know where you're going.
was that they were mad at the gay Bible without knowing that they were calling him Queen James 100 years ago because he was gay. So anyway, the King James Bible is a gay
It
Bible.
was authorized by.
Yeah. So if you like the King James Version, Amanda, right, you like the gay Bible. I'm sorry. That's it. That is what it is. Now, if you
Scotland it would have been considered lesser than England, right?
Yes.
At the time.
Yes.
So from a lesser known region,
Yeah.
known homosexual,
Yeah.
or suspected.
Yeah, and I'll say this at the time, they didn't, back then, it was kind of the same thing in Bible times, they didn't think of people as like an orientation that way. So like, he got married, he had kids, he had like 8 children, he like even, it was actually illegal to do what he did, but it was also like very public knowledge at the time. It was, anyway, but yes.
It was different.
Yes, it was different, yeah. It's not like he wouldn't publicly like, come out like that.
But,
Yeah.
from that, we have the King James
Yeah,
Version, which
and to be if you listen, if you're upset by that, I don't know what to tell you. That's just history. Now, if it makes you feel any better, he had nothing to do with it. They just put his name on it so he would allow it to be. Okay, so and if you think if I offended you by calling it the Gay Bible, I'm obviously joking. Okay, it is not. It's just a bad translation. So there you go. I don't know, whichever offends you more. I don't know. We don't use it. And I do think it's funny that the fundamentalist KJV only people who are pounding it is like, this is the only one. The king's not in it if the king's not on it kind of thing. Probably don't know any of this.
You're
so,
right.
well, it's probably for the best. But anyway, I had fun going down that Amazon rabbit trail. I didn't comment. I didn't make any side
Did you buy
remarks.
it?
No, I didn't buy it. No, I didn't buy it. I just had.
Jimmy's house.
No, yeah, I just sat there and had a very nerdy, like biblical history laugh at things. All right. So anyway, that's neither here nor there.
But it came right at a time though when probably it was because obviously the printing press and all that was around, but to have a Bible like this come out at a time when you kind of wanted to get the Bible in people's hands, even though it's not like you said, it's not the greatest.
I mean, it was at the time, 100%.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But still, it's interesting how certain technologies came along that really helped the church.
Yeah, and it also helps it make popular when you go. It's going to be in every church because
Yeah.
this is the authorized Bible.
Authorized.
So
Right.
we have to use this translation,
Right.
and you have to show up to church every day, or we're gonna like throw you in prison.
Right.
So it became very popular very quickly.
So
And it was, I'm obviously I've been kind of making fun. When I say it's the most important book of all time, I'm not joking. Like it is revolutionary. It has changed the world. So it's just interesting that it was kind of a throwaway concession by Queen James. That's all that, it is what it is. All right, we'll move on. So it is the most important book of all time. So I will mention, and under him, the Church of England entered a golden age. But as he got closer to death, things started to unravel. And next time we'll talk about what happens as King James I nears his death. Now, so that's the last part of the slides. But I think I would be remiss when I'm talking English Reformation. I don't have slides for him. But if I didn't talk about William Tyndale. So you probably heard of William Tyndale. William Tyndale was an Oxford scholar, and he published a translation of an English New Testament in 1525, 1526. So he published this while King Henry VIII was still the defender of the Catholic faith. So he had to do it from exile. Okay? And together with the completions of many of his assistants, it formed the basis for all subsequent English Bibles up until the 20th century. So although the King James Bible is the most important book of all time, we wouldn't have had it without Tyndale's Bible. And Tyndale wrote it from exile during the time when King Henry VIII was still really Catholic. He actually, in exile, he gets arrested and strangled by the Holy Roman Emperor's officials with the help of King Henry VIII. So King Henry VIII helps assassinate William Tyndale. William Tyndale becomes the first biblical translator of the Reformation to die. If he had lived a few more years, he would have seen King Henry VIII be king and be a Protestant king. And he wouldn't have lived long enough, obviously, to see the 1611 version. But his Bible, he would have seen his Bible printed, even in his martyrdom in 1536, around 16,000 copies of his Bible. In 10 years, 16,000 copies of his translation had gone into England in a country with no more than 2.5 million people. There were 16,000 Tyndale Bibles.
it wasn't easy to print back then. It's not
Yeah, it was
like
illegal.
You crank them out.
That was illegal. So
But it was a manual process.
yes, no,
These
printing
days.
was slow and it was illegal. So not a lot of printers would
Right.
want to print an illegal book.
And 16,000 is a lot.
It's a lot of copies. So William Tyndale, I couldn't go through the Reformation without talking about William Tyndale and the importance of him and what he accomplished with his translation of the English New Testament. And every English Bible up until pretty recently, up until the 20th century, which that's when I was born. I know Jordan and Callie and some of you are shocked that I was born in the 1900s, but yes, in the 20th century, it was incredibly important. I'll just briefly mention Ireland. So the Irish people never accepted the English religion. They never really liked the Church of England. Scotland had the Reformed Church, the Presbyterian Church. The Protestantism became the religion of the elite. It became the religion of the ruling class. But Roman Catholicism remained the religion of the people. So the Troubles, you can know the Irish Troubles that happened. You got North Ireland versus the rest of Ireland and all this bloodshed and stuff that's gone on and still kind of goes on. That's all Catholic versus Protestant. That goes back to this. That goes back to James I being the king of Ireland and Scotland and England, and him saying, okay, you're all Protestant. And the Irish people, okay, so the English people, what they hate more than anything is a foreigner telling them what to do. The Irish people, what they hate more than anything is an Englishman telling them what to do. So the Irish people remained Catholic because they didn't want to follow the English religion. And you still have this Protestant versus Catholic Irish thing today. We're talking 400 years later. So these things, they matter. They have impact. I mean, the reason why Nick Funk over at St. Paul's is called Father Nick, although I don't know why in the world you want to go by Father Funk, because it's a much better name. The reason he's Father Nick and wears a collar and is a priest is because Elizabeth was like, I still kind of like the bishops. You get what I'm saying? Like, I still like the Catholic priest thing, so we're going to still call him priest. Elizabeth made some decision because she randomly liked it 400 plus years ago, and that we call that, instead of calling him Pastor Nick, we call him Father Nick. Like, it's crazy. We're all Americans, so everything is like new to us, right? There's people living in like England in houses older than our country, but that like some random decisions are made that still affect how we live and worship and whatever today, and even some of the differences between us, and even why some people like fight and kill each other. Okay, so I'm gonna let you go. We'll do questions in just a minute. Before, and if you're online, you can't see this. I'll post a picture in our group. But this is a benefit of showing up. So if you're online, I apologize. What you have in front of you is an English red oak Bible chest or Bible box from the 1600s. This is mine. This is made of English red oak. It is from the 1600s. This box most likely contained, so houses started getting Bibles. It was often the first and only book that a family would get. This is either early in the 1600s or it's a poorer family that has this, because you'll see they get more and more innate the richer you get. This is a very basic Bible box, so it's either really early in the 1600s when they first started making them, or it's from a poor family. But this box most likely contained, in the 1600s, in England, a very early edition of the King James Bible. So I'll let you look at it when we're done. Please be very careful with it. It's very old. But I bought it a little bit ago, and I really wanted to bring it because I thought it was really important. So you get a chance to look and touch today what we're talking about. This is an English red oak 1600s Bible box. It still has some of the bottom stuff is not original, but like this up here is original. You'll be able to see it. A lot of this wood, you'll see the red in it because it's red oak. Anyway, it's really cool. I think it's cool.
But you don't know exactly like the family or anything?
No, I don't know. There's no like, no, I don't know the family or anything like that. But yeah.
Last name Boleyn is on.
Yeah. It says Henry Tudor, but I don't know who that was. I guess he like taught something. Maybe he was like a school teacher or something. Yeah. So I'll post a picture of it to the group, but everybody here, you can kind of check it out. All right. With that being said, any questions here or online about the English Reformation from 1525 to 1625?
Well, I
just say William Tyndall, something that Josh didn't touch on.
Yeah,
William
go ahead.
Tyndall has an amazing quote right before he gets executed.
Oh yeah.
Is that I would rather have, my goal is to have a boy in the plow know more about the Bible than you.
Yeah.
And the you he's referring to is the priest.
Yeah.
So then they go and kill him.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I mentioned that quote. He wanted a Bible in the hands of every plowboy, and if he had lived long enough, he would have seen it. And we all have benefited from the life and death of William Tyndale. But it's just crazy how people lived and died, and it was just based on if Mary Tudor had never been around, and it got from Edward to Elizabeth, Thomas Cranmer would have never died. Or he'd never been burned at the stake, and who knows how the Church of England would have been affected by a longer Cranmer, because Cranmer is incredibly influential in Church of England. So he goes from being the Archbishop of Canterbury one day, the next day he's getting burned at the stake at Oxford. So I've said this before, and I'll say it again, and it's a great point that Jared made, is that you have an English Bible, you have a Bible in your language because a lot of men and women died so that you could have the Bible in your language. You get to go to a church and hear your language because people died. You get to be baptized as a believer instead of baptized as an infant because people died to make that happen. You get to eat communion as a symbol and not as the presence of Jesus because people died to make that happen. Like, behind you, everything that we take for granted, getting the opportunity to come to a church that's not a state church, but is independent of the state, getting to come to a church and have a Bible in your language, getting a sermon that's in your language, getting communion, getting believers' baptism, everything that you and I enjoy, that we take for granted, we have because people died for it. So, you should read your Bible, because it's good to do, and because God wants you to. But you should also read it because people like William Tyndale literally gave their lives so people like you could do it, so that you could do it. So, next time, if you're not going to do it for yourself, if you're not going to do it because God wants you to, at least do it, pour one out for Tyndale and crack open the Bible and read some of it. So learn more about your history. Good point. Any other points, questions, comments? Cries of outrage, fits of anger? All right. Thank you, everybody who was here. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. This will probably be my last one for obvious reasons, so I'll probably get kicked out. But